If you're a fan of the Great Northern Railroad in the steam to diesel transition era, or even if you're not, this video will amaze you. Hi, this is Burr Stewart, and join me for a brief construction update of Bill Sornsin's magnificent Great Northern Cascade Division Model Railroad. I was over there for an operating session a few weeks ago and thought I would just take these vignettes to give you an idea of the progress that he's been making. This layout is housed in a very large building. He has work sessions and has some friends that are helping build the layout. You can see some finished scenery here. But the important thing to Bill is the operations, realistic operations in a timetable and train order environment in the 1950s during the transition from steam engines to diesel engines. So on the layout, you see quite a bit of both. Now this is a section of the shoreline route that runs from Everett down to Seattle.
Congratulations, Jonathan. You're the first train through here in this direction.
Before we go any further, let's just take a look at the schematic diagram of the layout that Bill is trying to create here. In the lower left, you can see the south staging from Yakima and Portland that comes up towards King Street Station. And then from King Street north, it's the GN territory, double track all the way through Interbay Yard, Ballard, Edmonds, and Everett Junction, where the eastbound main splits off to the east and the northbound main heads up towards Vancouver BC. You can also see that he's built the eastbound main to Lowell, Snohomish, and Monroe, and actually he's ending at Gold Bar at the moment, which we'll see in a moment. And eventually he'll get to Wenatchee. So that's the scope of this layout, and I'll get back to showing you the layout itself now. This is a switcher running in the Everett industrial area.
All right. I'll write that up. Anybody else here have a question while we were fooling around? Are you guys good?
Are those shorts generated over here or in the settlement? Okay.
And here is a nice NW5 switcher in the north end of Seattle's Interbay yard, which is big enough to have both a yardmaster, a north end switcher, and a south end switcher. I'll show you an overall view of that yard a little later in the video. Uh-oh, here comes a big steam engine. Very nice. Even the yardmaster can't help but watch it. This is that same Reefer train we saw earlier in the video, and it's going through on the main line, going through the Interbay yard in Seattle. One of the amazing things with steam engines is that he lit up the cab and you can see the crew in there and you can hear the steam sounds coming from the decoder. Here's a picture of a train coming out of the Delta yard, I believe, and entering the main line to head east over the Cascade Mountains, in this case Stevens Pass. As I'll show you in a minute, Bill's made a tremendous amount of progress in the last year or two with construction of the benchwork and track, and trains like this are now running all the way to Gold Bar, which is a town at the base of the climb up to Snohomish and Stevens Pass. This particular train, you can see, has 6 GP7s on the point. And I fanned out the view so you could see how long this train is. It's hard to comprehend a layout this large. I don't remember the exact dimensions, but it's at least 40 feet wide and 100 feet long. Above the train, you can see the bench work for the next deck, which he's in the middle of constructing. Eventually, the trains will run all the way up to Stevens Pass and then back down towards Wenatchee. The newsprint there gives you an idea of the scenery under construction. Bill is making every effort to copy the prototype track plans and as much of the scenery and structures that he can from the actual Great Northern in the western Washington state region. You can see a Northern Pacific train heading off to the right there. Here we're in the town of Snohomish. And this is a long bridge over the Snohomish River. And Bill spent a lot of time figuring out how to model the exact concrete abutments that the bridge is riding on. They're very close to the exact prototype structures.
Oh, look at you.
Here you can see the multiple decks that he's planning. And that space on the left with the plywood will eventually have a raised floor and a mushroom-style design. Here we've come almost to the end of the modeled main line, and we're approaching Gold Bar. In a few months, he's going to have all of the tracks that were in Gold Bar. I think it's 4 or 5 tracks. So he'll be able to use that as a temporary staging yard. At the moment, he's just ending the main line with 1 track, so we have to pull very slowly up to the bridge so we don't smash into the train that's already parked there that ran earlier in the session. This gives you a good idea of how he's building it with the homosote strips with the kerfs cut in them to bend them and the extruded foam for the scenery in places. And you saw that he was using hard shell in places as well. Well, I thought we would move it just a little bit closer to the caboose of the previous train. Again, he's really worked on getting the abutments right and the bridges as close as possible. Very nice. That is what you call a long train. Now we're going to take a tour of the recently constructed areas. This is the town of Gold Bar that I mentioned, with a large articulated steam engine. And on the right is the shoreline route that we saw earlier in the video. And you can see he's starting to build the upper deck benchwork. Look how long that train is. And of course, there's the train we just parked a minute ago. That beautiful stone abutment, or a concrete abutment. Wow, that was a long train too. You can see the double decks here, and that upper fascia has to do with the Y that's going to be in the Snohomish yard. Now we're coming into what I believe is the town of Monroe, which had a certain amount of switching activity that will be fun for future operators. Here's a picture of the prototype layout of the tracks. He'll replicate as much of this as he can. There's a sawdust burner, a work train of some kind that's parked on a siding. And now we head across a 30-foot long stretch of absolutely straight track. Bill has some good stories about how hard it is to make a 30-foot long section of straight track. You have to do a lot of sighting with a laser level and everything else just to get it perfect, just like the real railroad was. West of Monroe is that River Delta area. You saw all this going the other direction, but I wanted to give you a more complete tour of the latest progress. Yeah, that train is in what's a staging track for now. And down below, there's some tracks there that are the Vancouver, British Columbia staging, the north line that went north from Everett up to Vancouver. This is Everett's industrial switching area, one of them, called Lowell. It's on the main line east of downtown Everett. To get the most prototypical arrangement of the tracks, he built a very complex helix, or set of helices in here. I won't go into explaining it now, but the bottom line is that most of the industries in Everett are faithfully modeled, and the routes that trains took are also faithfully modeled. So this is the Everett Depot, and you have the low line and the high line. The Everett Depot is currently being represented by a beautiful model of the Snohomish Depot that Bill Messicar built and is here waiting for its future location up in Snohomish. And of course, this shows he's got the coastline and the main line, or you might say the low line and the high line. That's another picture of how the two lines diverged right after Everett Junction. And down here is the Delta yard modeled underneath, which at this point is mostly a staging yard. And you can see several trains ready to come out. Now above the boxcars is the Everett Junction, which is the place where the double track came together and then split between the high line and the low line, or you could say the eastbound main and the northbound main. There are quite a few oil terminals along this coast route south of Everett, and a train called the Oiler that handles them. And of course, what makes an operation fun is that when you're running the Oiler, you have to stay out of the way of mainline trains on the double track mainline. But you have a lot of tank cars to switch, so you have to refer to the timetable, which is there on the fascia. Modeling prototype timetables is a sub-hobby into itself, but this is the current state of the timetable, as close as possible to the actual GN timetable, but it only represents the trains that Bill is actually running during his op sessions. And here is a rock wall, a seawall, that exists along shore route. And Bill made a prototype of this and gave it to Chooch Industries, and then they mass-produced it so that it wouldn't take him his whole lifetime just to build a seawall.
Because I know having the cards in the...
No, actually they were introduced when I first introduced the waybill.
And there's Bill explaining something to somebody.
I used to have that other goofy.
Now we go into the other room of the layout, if you haven't seen this. Down below is the Portland staging. And up above on the left is South Seattle, which has a bunch of industries. Down in the far distance is the King Street Station. You can see all the coaches in the coach yard on the left. I know I'm not doing this justice. I just wanted to give you a quick tour of his progress. You can see he's starting to spray paint the track in this area. And of course, after that will come ballast, right? There's a beautiful model of the King Street Station, kind of the signature scene on his layout. And these are the downtown Seattle industries. And of course, that tunnel portal goes into the downtown Seattle tunnel, which comes out on the other end over in Interbay. But this is the staging yard, the other end of the staging yard, the south staging. And there's another view of the passenger tracks and passenger station.
Okay, then on 5.
Now, after that one loop in the helix inside the tunnel, he comes out into the industrial areas that are north of downtown Seattle. Which include, of course, this 4-track diamond crossing of the Northern Pacific over to some industries in the Smith Cove. And then this is the amazingly complete Interbay yard.
All right, we're gonna cut this. Actually, no, can you pull this whole cut?
Yep.
All right.
Well, try.
Yeah, let's try to pull that whole cut. Because we're gonna put...
And you can see that we have hostler jobs for the engines and lots of switching going on. Dave is having a great time switching in Interbay. Excellent. And another Bill Messicar masterpiece, this curved ice house that was located just to the north of the main yard. Bill did a nice job on this curved icing house, huh? Back in the days when reefers were iced. Isn't that nice? On a curve like that? I'll give you a view of the overall yard from this end. Yeah, you can see how big it is, sort of. And you can see the scenery under construction. And that's all I have to show you today of Bill's amazing layout. But I do have some quick shots from an operating session at Bill's 6 years ago. So let's close out the video by watching how much progress he's made in the last 6 years. You can see here there's no scenery, and yet he was still having terrific operating sessions. Bill's been working on this layout for over 20 years, and he's also been very active in the Great Northern Railway Historical Society. I'll put the link to that in the description below. But he's learned as much as he can from veterans from the Great Northern and all of the publications of the GNRHS, and he continues to make progress on this enormously vast model railroad. Those of us that live in the area really enjoy being able to run trains on the part of it that's already up and running. And as time goes by, the main line will get longer, the scenery will get better, and everyone involved will have much fun with trains.